Hello and welcome to this week's midweek mini lesson. We are in 1 Timothy chapter 2, starting in verse 8, and we're just going to finish the rest of the chapter. So here we go. It says, "Therefore, I want the men in every place to pray, lifting up holy hands without anger and dispute. Likewise, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or expensive apparel, but rather by means of good works, as is proper for women making claim to godliness. A woman must quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness. But I do not allow women to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. For it was Adam who was first created, then Eve, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a wrongdoer. But women will be preserved through childbirth if they continue in faith, love, and sanctity with moderation." Okay, a lot of stuff in this little section. First thing is that we've been taught over and over again throughout all of our Christian lives, basically, to pray with our eyes closed, our hands folded, head bowed, right? Well, nowhere in the Bible does it actually say that. Actually, this verse right here, verse 8, is the one that actually is the only time where you actually have some sort of indication as to your posture and how you should pray. Now, we do that because we're trying to minimize distraction, and I get that. But verse 8, it says, "Therefore I want men in every place to pray, holding up holy hands without anger and dispute." So it's actually having your hands raised to heaven when you pray. I think that's really interesting. Also, the rest of this from 9 on is all about this role of women, is kind of how a lot of people would view this. And I want to kind of tell you what actually is going on here, because a lot of people misconstrue this. Back then in the Jewish culture, they actually would have men and women sitting on opposite sides of the church. Think in our church, we would have men sitting on one side and women on the other. And the pastor or the priest or whoever would say something, and the women would not understand. The woman would stand up, look over to her husband, and say, "What does this mean?" And the husband would have to look over at his wife and tell her what it means. And this would happen in the middle of the service. And basically, what's going on here is Paul saying, "Look, I don't want women to do that." Later in a different letter, he actually says, "I don't want women to speak in church like that. Ask your husband at home," is essentially what he says. And that's what's going on here. It also says not to have authority over. That's something that is, I think it has to do more with the actual familial part of it, rather than maybe the cultural overarching thing. That doesn't mean that women can't be leaders or women can't be pastors and stuff like that. In fact, Paul actually thanks many people at the end of each of his letters. And as you're going through and reading through his letters, he's thanking women for their leadership role in the church for many different things. One of them he actually calls, it's translated as a deaconess. Back then, they didn't have deacons the way we kind of think of them. Deacons actually were usually the ones that preached. So he was thanking a woman as a preacher. So it's really interesting to kind of go through and see what is actually being said, and sadly, sometimes how we have misconstrued it. So I just needed you to understand that part of it, and how it's really interesting as you go through and look at context here and really look at how God has completely freed up the church. Later on, he says there's no difference between man and woman, right? No difference between Jew and Gentile. No difference between black and white, free and slave. No difference at all. So he's saying that there's no difference in here. In fact, it's when two become one that's the goal. That's the key to everything, is that when man and woman come together and they create one, that is where the true value of humanity lies. So I hope you enjoyed this week's midweek mini lesson, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.